Lady Iris Ashworth sat in the portrait chair and felt her face arrange itself into something acceptable. The morning light fell through the studio's north window in pale sheets, catching dust and turpentine fumes, and the painter, Mr. Voss, commissioned at great expense, stood before his blank canvas, watching her with an expression she could not interpret. She had worn her best morning dress, the blue one that made her eyes appear softer than they were. She had scrubbed the ink from her wrist until the skin turned pink. She had prepared herself to be looked at the way a woman prepares for any public examination, by becoming smaller, quieter, more convenient. And then the painter set down his charcoal and said, in a voice like gravel smoothed by water, "You may stop arranging your face, my lady." The words landed in the silent studio like stones dropped into still water, and Iris felt something inside her go cold and bright at once. The particular terror of being seen by someone who was not supposed to be looking that closely. The first sitting began with a lie. Iris had been perfecting for 3 years. She entered the studio at Cavendish House precisely at 10 o'clock, accompanied by her maid and carrying the composure she had learned to wear like a second skin. The room smelled of linseed oil and something sharper, turpentine perhaps, or the particular chemical bite of pigments ground fresh that morning. Light poured through the tall north-facing windows in columns that seemed almost solid, illuminating a space that was part workshop and part theater. Canvases leaned against the walls in various states of completion. A long table held brushes standing in jars like strange bouquets. Mr. Voss stood near the window, a man of perhaps 50 with paint-stained fingers and eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they touched. He gestured toward a chair positioned to catch the best light. "Please sit, Lady Iris. We will begin with your comfort and proceed from there." She sat. She folded her hands. She turned her face toward the window at the angle she had practiced in her mirror that morning. Chin slightly lifted, eyes cast neither too high nor too low. Mouth settled into an expression that suggested pleasant availability without actual emotion. It was the face she gave to dinner parties and morning calls and every formal occasion that required her presence, but not her participation. Voss studied her for a long moment. He did not lift his charcoal. He did not approach the canvas. He simply stood there, looking at her with the clinical attention of a surgeon examining a wound. Then he spoke. "You may stop arranging your face, my lady." Iris blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You sat down and chose an expression. I watched you select it, the way a woman selects a hat before leaving the house. I am not interested in painting the hat." Heat crept up her neck. "I am not arranging anything, Mr. Voss. This is simply my face." "No." His voice was not unkind, but it was utterly certain. "This is the face you've decided is appropriate for a betrothal portrait. It is very pretty. It is also utterly dishonest. I was not hired to paint pretty lies. You were hired to paint a portrait suitable for the Ashworth family and the Duke of Cavendish. I am sitting as I have been instructed." "Then your instructions are inadequate." He set down his charcoal and crossed his arms. "I paint what I see, Lady Iris, not what you wish me to see, not what your family wishes the Duke to see. If you insist on performing for me, we will be here a very long time and produce a very bad painting." She should have been offended. She should have risen from the chair and reported his impertinence to her father. Instead, she felt something crack inside the careful architecture of her composure, something small and dangerous, like ice fracturing under weight. "What exactly do you wish me to do?" "Stop performing. Sit as you would sit if no one were watching. Let your face do what it does when you are not forcing it into shapes. That would be considerably less marriageable." "I am not painting a marriage proposal, my lady. I am painting a woman." The quiet that descended felt enormous. Iris sat very still, aware of her maid standing near the door, aware of the light on her face, aware that this painter was asking her to do something she had not done in 3 years, to stop controlling what people saw when they looked at her. Slowly, deliberately, she let the performance drop. It felt like removing a corset after a long day. Her shoulders lowered slightly, her jaw unclenched. The pleasant expression she had been holding dissolved, and what surfaced in its place was something she rarely let anyone see. Watchful intelligence, guarded fury. The face of a woman who had learned that hoping for things was the fastest way to have them taken from her. Voss inhaled sharply. "That," he said, "is considerably more interesting." Before Iris could respond, a voice came from the doorway. "How is the sitting progressing, Mr. Voss?" She turned. The Duke of Cavendish stood in the threshold, tall and composed in the morning light. Lord Gabriel Holt, 33, reformer, architect of canal legislation and parliamentary procedure. The man she was contracted to marry in 4 months' time. They had met once before, at a formal dinner arranged by their families. He had been polite. She had been appropriate. Neither had said anything that mattered. Voss did not turn from his canvas. "Your Grace, have you met the woman you are marrying?" Gabriel's expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "We dined together last month." "Dining is not meeting." Voss gestured toward a chair in the corner, half hidden in shadow. "Sit down. Watch. You may learn something about your future wife that a dinner table cannot teach you." Iris expected the Duke to refuse. Men of his position did not take instruction from painters. But Gabriel crossed the room without protest and sat in the indicated chair, folding his long frame into the shadows as though he belonged there. Voss returned his attention to Iris. "Hold that expression. Do not soften it. Do not make it easier." She held it, the real face, the one she gave to no one. And Gabriel watched. She could feel his attention like a weight on her skin, not intrusive, but present, steady and focused in a way that made her want to turn away and hold still at the same time. She kept her eyes on the window, on the light, on anything except the man sitting in the corner, whose gaze had begun to feel like a question she did not know how to answer. Voss worked in silence for 20 minutes, his charcoal scratching against the prepared canvas in soft, rhythmic strokes. When he finally stepped back, he studied what he had captured, then glanced toward the corner where Gabriel sat. "Your Grace, you may go about your day. The sitting will continue for another hour." Gabriel rose. He moved toward the door, then paused beside Iris's chair. For a moment, she thought he might speak. Instead, he simply looked at her. Really looked. The way Voss had looked, as though seeing something he had not noticed before. Then he left. Voss set down his charcoal and walked to the window, staring out at the gardens below. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "Your betrothed has excellent posture and no expression whatsoever. Does he always hold himself as though he's being examined by a committee?" Iris found herself answering honestly. "I do not know him well enough to say." "A pity. You're about to spend your life with him." "Yes." Voss turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "I will need you to sit twice a week for the next 6 weeks. Can you manage that?" "Of course." "Good. And Lady Iris, do not scrub the ink from your wrist before you come here. I saw the pink skin this morning. If you write, own it. The small rebellions are the only honest things most of us have left." He dismissed her then, and Iris walked out of the studio with her heart beating too fast and her carefully constructed composure fractured in ways she did not yet understand. That evening, alone in his private study, Voss prepared a second canvas. He stretched it himself, sized it with rabbit skin glue, and set it beside the first. Then he opened the locked drawer in his desk and removed a letter written in a woman's hand. Elegant script on heavy paper, the wax seal already broken. He read it again, though he had memorized the contents weeks ago. Mr. Voss, my son will tell you how to paint her. Ignore him. Paint her as she is. Then paint him watching her. The second canvas is the one that matters. He will not commission it himself. He does not know he needs it. Charlotte Cavendish. Voss folded the letter and returned it to the drawer. Then he turned to the second canvas and began sketching from memory. The Duke of Cavendish in his shadowed corner, watching a woman he thought he was acquiring, unaware that his carefully maintained composure had cracked the moment she stopped performing hers. Gabriel returned to the studio 3 days later. He told himself it was proper supervision of the commission. The portrait was a significant expense, and the Ashworth family had specific expectations regarding its presentation. It was his responsibility to ensure Voss understood the requirements. A flattering likeness suitable for display in the Cavendish Gallery. A portrait that conveyed both Iris's breeding and her suitability as a duchess. These were the reasons he gave himself as he climbed the stairs to the studio at precisely 10 o'clock on the morning of the second sitting. None of them were true. He came because he could not stop thinking about the woman in the chair, not the pleasant, composed girl from the formal dinner, but the stranger who had surfaced when Voss demanded honesty. The watchful eyes, the guarded intelligence, the expression that suggested she was cataloging everything in the room and finding most of it inadequate. He had spent 3 years in Parliament learning to read the faces of men who lied professionally. He knew performance when he saw it, and when Iris Ashworth dropped her careful mask, what he saw underneath arrested him completely. The studio door was open. Gabriel entered quietly and took his place in the corner chair without announcing himself. Voss glanced up from his palette, registered Gabriel's presence with a slight nod, and returned to his work. Iris sat in the morning light, wearing a different dress. Green this time, with lace at the collar, and the same unperformed expression Voss had drawn from her 3 days ago. She was not looking at the painter. She was looking at something beyond the window. Her attention focused on a thought Gabriel could not access. Voss spoke without lifting his brush. "Lady Iris, tell me about your education." She blinked, returning from wherever her mind had gone. The usual accomplishments? Music, French, watercolors? And the unusual accomplishments? A pause. "I do not take your meaning." "You have ink on your left wrist. You scrubbed it before the first sitting. You did not scrub it today. That suggests either carelessness or a decision to stop hiding. I am curious which." Iris glanced at her wrist. A small dark stain marked the skin just above her pulse point. "I write letters. The ink is stubborn." "What kind of letters require that much ink?" "Personal correspondence." "To whom?" "Friends." "Friends who inspire you to write with such frequency that you carry permanent stains?" Iris's jaw tightened. "Mr. Voss, are these questions necessary for the portrait?" "They are necessary for me to understand the woman I am painting. You may decline to answer. But if you do, I will paint the evasion. And evasions are not flattering." Gabriel watched this exchange from his shadowed corner, fascinated. He had never heard anyone speak to a lady of quality with such blunt disregard for social convention. He had certainly never heard a woman respond with the kind of controlled anger Iris was displaying now. Her hands perfectly still in her lap, her voice level, her eyes bright with fury she was not permitting herself to express. "I write essays," she said finally. "Political commentary." They are published weekly in the Northern Correspondent under a pseudonym. My father does not know. If he did, he would forbid it, as it is not suitable for a woman of my position to have public opinions on matters of governance." The words fell into the studio like stones into deep water. Voss smiled, a small, satisfied expression. "Thank you. That is considerably more useful than watercolors." He returned to his canvas, and Iris sat very still, her face carrying the particular tension of someone who has just revealed a dangerous secret and is waiting to see what will be done with it. Gabriel said nothing. He remained in his corner, watching her the way he watched parliamentary debates. Looking for the truth beneath the performance, the unguarded moment when a person's real position surfaced. He had read the Northern Correspondent. He knew the essays signed Veritas. Sharp, informed arguments about reform legislation and the architecture of political power. He had quoted one of them in committee 3 weeks ago. The idea that the woman sitting 10 feet away had written those essays seemed impossible. And yet, watching her now, the intelligence in her eyes, the controlled fury, the ink stain she had stopped hiding, he believed it completely. The sitting continued for another hour. Voss asked more questions. Iris answered some and deflected others with the skill of someone who had spent years protecting her secrets. Gabriel watched and said nothing, learning more about his future wife in 60 minutes than he had learned in 2 months of formal courtship. When Voss finally dismissed her, Iris rose from the chair and turned toward the door. She saw Gabriel then, sitting in his corner, and stopped. "Your Grace, I did not realize you were present." It was a lie. She had known he was there from the moment he entered. He could see it in her eyes. The careful recalibration, the performance returning as she remembered she was being observed. "I hope I did not disturb the sitting," Gabriel said. "Not at all." She inclined her head in a gesture of perfect courtesy and left the studio, her maid following. Gabriel remained in his chair. Voss cleaned his brushes in silence, then spoke without turning. "You are in love with her." The words landed like a blow. Gabriel went very still. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." Voss set down his brush and turned to face him. "You have been sitting in that corner for 2 hours, watching a woman you barely know, and your face has been doing things you do not seem aware of." "I am a portrait painter, Your Grace. I make my living reading faces. Yours is currently an open book written in a language you do not speak. I am supervising a commission. You are falling in love. The 2 activities are not mutually exclusive, but I suspect only one of them explains why you have returned to this studio twice in 4 days when you could have sent a secretary." Gabriel stood. "The portrait is progressing well. Please continue as you see fit." He walked to the door, his posture perfect, his expression composed. Voss's voice followed him. "Your Grace, when you decide what you want this portrait to say, you might consider telling me. At present, I am painting what I see. I suspect that may not align with what you wish the world to see." Gabriel did not respond. He left the studio and descended the stairs to his study, where he sat at his desk and stared at the canal reform bill he had been drafting for 6 months. The words blurred. He could not focus. He kept seeing Iris's face when she admitted she wrote essays, the defiance, the fear, the intelligence she had been taught to hide because it made her unmarriageable. He had chosen her because the Ashworth family controlled a voting bloc that would secure his legislation. He had agreed to the betrothal because it was strategically sound. He had expected a wife who would manage his household and produce heirs, and ask nothing of him beyond financial security and social position. He had not expected to care what she thought, He had not expected to want to hear her speak. He had not expected to sit in a painter's studio watching her with the way a man watches something he did not know he needed. That night, Voss worked on the second canvas, the hidden one, the portrait Gabriel did not know existed. He painted from memory and from the sketches he had made during the sitting. Gabriel's hands gripping the arms of his chair when Iris revealed she wrote under a pseudonym. The way his jaw tightened when she spoke about political commentary. The unguarded 3 seconds when he forgot to compose his face and simply looked at her with something close to hunger. Voss painted the truth. He always did. It was the only thing his art was good for. The sittings continued twice weekly. Gabriel attended all of them. By the 5th sitting, his presence had become routine. He arrived before Iris, took his place in the corner, and watched Voss work. He did not speak unless spoken to. He did not interfere. He simply observed, learning the rhythms of the studio, the way light changed through the morning, the particular scratch of charcoal on canvas, the questions Voss asked that were never about painting and always about truth. And he watched Iris. He watched her arrive each time with her performance carefully arranged, then watched Voss dismantle it with questions that demanded honesty. He watched her grow more comfortable in the chair, as though the studio had become the one place where she did not have to pretend. He watched her speak about books she had read and essays she had written, and the particular frustration of having opinions no one wanted to hear because they came from a woman's mouth. He watched her become real. And Iris, for her part, had begun watching him. It started during the 4th sitting, when Voss asked her about the betrothal. "Are you pleased with the arrangement, Lady Iris?" She had paused before answering. "It is a suitable match." "That is not what I asked." "It is the answer I am giving." "Then I will paint a suitable match." "Is that what you wish to hang in the Cavendish Gallery? A portrait of suitability?" Iris had looked directly at Gabriel then, still sitting in his shadowed corner, and asked, "What does His Grace wish to hang in the gallery?" It was the first time she had acknowledged his presence during a sitting. Gabriel had not been prepared for the directness of her gaze, the challenge in it, the suggestion that she saw through his careful supervision to whatever lay beneath. "I wish for an honest portrait," he had said. "Of me or of the arrangement?" "Are they not the same thing?" "No, Your Grace, they are not." The conversation had ended there. But something had shifted. Iris no longer pretended Gabriel was not in the room. She spoke as though he were part of the sitting, and her words carried a sharpness he recognized from the Veritas essays. The particular edge of someone who had been told to be quiet and had decided she was finished obeying. During the 6th sitting, Voss asked her about governance. "You write about reform legislation. What do you believe is the greatest obstacle to meaningful change?" Iris did not hesitate. Men who mistake procedure for principle. Men who believe that if the process is elegant, the outcome must be just. From his corner, Gabriel spoke. "And women who write anonymously, rather than attaching their names to their convictions?" She turned to look at him fully. "Women who write under their own names are called hysterical and ignored. Women who write under pseudonyms are called sharp and quoted in Parliament. I have chosen effectiveness over recognition. Have you never done the same, Your Grace? I have put my name on every bill I have drafted. Because you are a duke. Your name carries weight. Mine carries scandal. We are not operating under the same conditions. So you hide. So I survive." The exchange hung between them like a challenge. Voss continued painting, his expression unreadable. Gabriel felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger, but recognition. She was right. He had never had to choose between being heard and being acceptable. His voice had always mattered because of what he was, not because of what he said. "I apologize," he said quietly. "That was unjust." Iris blinked. "You are apologizing?" "Yes." "Men of your position do not typically apologize to women. Then men of my position are fools." She studied him for a long moment, and Gabriel had the uncomfortable sense that she was cataloging him the way Voss cataloged faces, looking for the truth beneath the performance, diagnosing what she saw. "You are not what I expected, Your Grace." "Neither are you, Lady Iris." Voss set down his brush. "This is an excellent sitting. Please continue being honest with each other. It makes my work considerably easier." The sitting ended shortly after. As Iris rose to leave, her shawl slipped from her shoulders. Gabriel moved without thinking, crossed the space between his corner and her chair in 3 strides, and caught the fabric before it fell. His hand closed on silk still warm from her skin. He held it for a moment too long. Then he returned it, draping it carefully over her shoulders without meeting her eyes. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Of course." She left. Gabriel remained standing beside the empty chair, aware that something had just happened that he did not have words for. Some shift in the air, some acknowledgement that the space between them had grown smaller and more dangerous. From across the room, Voss was already sketching. The second canvas hidden behind the first. Gabriel's hand extended, holding silk. The unguarded expression on his face in the 3 seconds before he remembered to compose himself. Voss painted the truth. He always did. The 7th sitting began differently. Gabriel arrived late, delayed by a parliamentary session that had run past midnight. He climbed the stairs to the studio with exhaustion pulling at his bones and his mind still tangled in committee debates. He entered without knocking, without remembering to arrange his face into the composed mask he wore in public. Iris was already in the chair. She turned toward the door as he entered, and their eyes met. For 3 seconds, perhaps 4, Gabriel forgot to perform. His expression was raw. Attention, hunger, something close to desperation. The unguarded face of a man looking at the most important thing in the room. Then he remembered where he was. The mask returned. He crossed to his corner and sat, folding his exhaustion into stillness. But Iris had seen, and Voss had seen. The city continued in silence for 20 minutes. Iris held her pose, but her attention had shifted. She was no longer looking at the window or the light or the vague middle distance Voss preferred. She was watching Gabriel the way he had been watching her for weeks, studying him, cataloging the small fractures in his composure. Finally, she broke pose. "Mr. Voss." "Yes, Lady Iris?" "When you paint a subject who is performing, who gives you a face instead of their face, what do you do?" Voss paused, his brush hovering over the canvas. "I paint what is underneath. The performance is the first layer. The truth is the second. And if the subject does not know they are performing, then the truth becomes more interesting. Self-deception is harder to paint than deliberate lies." Iris turned in her chair to look directly at Gabriel. What is underneath his performance? The question landed in the studio like a stone through glass. Gabriel went very still. Voss set down his brush. "You would have to ask him, Lady Iris, though I suspect he does not know the answer." "I know the answer," Gabriel said quietly. Both of them turned to look at him. He remained in his corner, hands gripping the arms of his chair, his careful composure fracturing under the weight of Iris's attention. "Then tell me," she said. "Why?" "Because I have been sitting in this chair for 6 weeks, letting a painter strip away every defense I have." Because you have been sitting in that corner, watching me become visible while you remain hidden. Because if I am going to marry you, I would like to know who I am marrying. The words were not angry. They were steady and clear and utterly without performance. Gabriel looked at her. Really looked, the way he had looked that first morning when Voss demanded she stop arranging her face, and felt something inside him crack. I do not know how to answer that question. Then do not answer it. Just stop pretending you are not here for the same reason I am. And what reason is that? This is the only room where either of us has permission to be honest. The hush that descended felt enormous. Gabriel wanted to argue. He wanted to deflect. He wanted to perform the role of principled duke who had everything under control. Instead, he told the truth. I am here because watching you has become the most honest thing I do. Iris inhaled sharply. Voss, from his position behind the canvas, smiled, a small, satisfied expression. That, Voss said, is useful. Please hold that thought, Your Grace. I need to see your face when you say things that matter. Gabriel barely heard him. He was looking at Iris, and she was looking back, and the space between the chair and the corner had become the most important distance in London. The 8th sitting did not happen as scheduled. Iris arrived at the studio to find Voss working alone, a different canvas on his easel, a landscape half finished. He looked up when she entered. Lady Iris, His Grace sent word that he will not be attending today. Is he unwell? He did not say. He sent instructions regarding the portrait. Voss set down his brush and crossed to a small table where a sealed letter waited. He handed it to her. Iris broke the seal and read. Mr. Voss, paint Lady Iris exactly as she is. Do not soften her expression. Do not make her more convenient. The Ashworth family's instructions are rescinded. You will follow your own judgment. Cavendish. She read it twice. Then she looked up at Voss. He is contradicting my father's explicit instructions. Yes. My father will be furious. The portrait was meant to present a suitable bride. His Grace appears to have decided that suitability is less important than truth. Iris folded the letter carefully. Her hands were steady, but something in her chest had gone tight and strange. Why would he do this? Voss studied her for a long moment. You are an intelligent woman, Lady Iris. I suspect you know the answer. I would prefer to hear you say it. Very well. Your betrothed is in love with you. He does not know how to say it. He does not know if he is permitted to feel it. So he is saying it the only way he knows how, by ensuring that the portrait shows the woman he sees, not the woman your family wishes him to see. The declaration settled over her like snow, cold and undeniable. Iris sat down in the portrait chair, not because Voss had asked her to, but because her legs had stopped working properly. He barely knows me. He has been sitting in that corner for 8 sittings watching you become real. That is more than most men see of their wives in a lifetime. He is a duke. He chose me for political alliance. He chose you for political alliance. He is staying for something else entirely. Iris looked at the letter in her hands. Gabriel's handwriting, strong, precise, the script of a man who had been trained to control everything, including the shape of his words. And yet this letter, with its blunt instruction to paint her exactly as she was, felt like the least controlled thing he had ever written. What do I do with this? She asked quietly. That depends. Do you love him? I do not know him well enough to love him. You know him better than you think. You have been watching him the same way he has been watching you. You have seen the cracks in his composure. You have seen the man underneath the Duke. The question is not whether you know him. The question is whether you are willing to let him be known. Iris stood. I need to leave. We have not finished the sitting. I cannot sit today. Please send word to His Grace that the portrait is progressing well and that I will return when I am able. She left the studio before Voss could respond, her mind spinning, her chest tight with something she could not name. That evening, her father summoned her to his study. Viscount Ashworth was a man who believed in appearances. He had built his political career on strategic marriages and careful alliances, and he had raised his daughter to understand that her value lay in her ability to be useful. When Iris entered his study, he was holding a letter, not Gabriel's instructions to Voss, but something else. The Duke has sent word that the portrait is to be painted without our input. He has rescinded the instructions we provided to Mr. Voss. Yes, Father. This is unacceptable. The portrait was commissioned to present you in a manner befitting a duchess. Voss is known for brutal honesty. If he paints you without guidance, the result will be unmarriageable. Iris kept her voice level. His Grace appears to disagree. His Grace is a fool. He is thinking with sentiment instead of strategy. You will speak to him. You will insist that Voss follow our original instructions. I will not. Her father looked up sharply. I beg your pardon? I will not speak to the Duke about the portrait. If he wishes me painted honestly, that is his choice. It is not his choice alone. This betrothal serves both families. The portrait must reflect that. The portrait will reflect what His Grace commissions. If you take issue with his instructions, you may address him directly. Viscount Ashworth stood, his expression cold. You are becoming difficult, Iris. I had hoped the betrothal would cure you of that tendency. It appears I was wrong. I am not ill, Father. I am simply tired of being told that my value depends on how well I can pretend to be someone else. She left before he could respond, her pulse racing, her hands trembling with the particular adrenaline that comes from saying something true and dangerous. That night, alone in her room, she took out her writing paper and began a new Veritas essay. The words came fast and sharp, fueled by fury she had been holding back for years. On the architecture of convenience. Why men who mistake control for love should not be trusted with either. She wrote for 3 hours. When she finished, her hands were covered in ink, and the essay was the best thing she had ever produced. She did not scrub the ink from her wrists before she went to bed. Iris did not return to the studio for a week. Gabriel sent 2 letters. She did not answer them. Her father sent a note to Cavendish House expressing concern about the portrait's direction. Gabriel responded with a single line. The portrait will proceed as commissioned. On the 8th day, Iris received a letter that was not from Gabriel. It was from Voss. Lady Iris, I am writing to inform you that the portrait is nearly complete. I would like you to see it before the final varnish is applied. Please come to the studio at your convenience. There is something you should know about the commission. Voss. She went the next morning. The studio was empty when she arrived. Voss was not at his easel. The main portrait, the one of her, stood covered with a cloth. But there was something else in the room, a second canvas, turned against the wall. Iris walked slowly toward it, her heart beating too fast. She turned the canvas and saw Gabriel. Not the Duke of Cavendish, not the composed reformer who sat in Parliament, not the man who performed principle with surgical precision. This was Gabriel unguarded. Gabriel in the stolen moments Voss had captured over 8 sittings, entering the studio before he remembered to compose his face, watching her with an expression that carried hunger and attention and something close to desperation. his hands clenched on the arms of his chair, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on something beyond the frame, on her, with the particular intensity of a man trying not to feel what he is feeling and failing completely. Iris stood before the portrait for a long time, her breath caught somewhere in her chest. Behind her, Voss's voice. His mother commissioned it. She turned. Voss stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. I do not understand. Before the Duchess died, she sent me 2 letters. The first commissioned a betrothal portrait of whichever woman the Duke chose. The second, sealed, to be opened only when the commission began, contained different instructions. He crossed to his desk and removed a folded paper from the drawer. He handed it to Iris. She read Charlotte Cavendish's final words. "Paint her as she is, then paint him watching her. The second canvas is the one that matters. He does not know he needs it." Iris looked up at Voss, her vision blurring. She knew. She understood the disease. She spent 30 years performing the role of perfect Duchess, and it killed her. She wanted her son to see what he was doing to himself before it was too late. He does not know this exists. No. I was instructed to reveal both portraits simultaneously, after the commission was complete. Iris looked back at Gabriel's portrait. The cracks in his composure, the visible evidence of feeling he could not control. She recognized it because she had been doing the same thing, performing composure while something underneath fractured and bled. He will destroy it. Perhaps, or perhaps he will see himself the way his mother hoped he would, as a man who is allowed to feel, even when feeling is inconvenient. His mother was braver than he is. His mother was dying. Courage is cheaper when you have nothing left to lose. Iris stood in the silent studio, looking at the 2 portraits. Hers, showing the woman she had been taught to hide. His, showing the man he did not know he was. 2 people performing control. 2 people failing. She folded Charlotte's letter carefully and placed it on the table. When will you show him? When the varnish dries. 3 days. I would like to be there. That may not be wise. I was not asking for wisdom, Mr. Voss. I was asking for permission. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Come on the 3rd day, morning light, 10 o'clock. Iris left the studio and walked directly to Cavendish House. She did not send word ahead. She simply arrived and asked for the Duke. Gabriel received her in the library. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, his cravat slightly loosened, the careful composure he wore in public showing visible strain. Lady Iris, I did not expect you. I saw the second portrait. He went very still. What second portrait? The one your mother commissioned. The one Mr. Voss has been painting for 8 weeks without your knowledge. The portrait of you watching me. The color drained from Gabriel's face. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. My mother commissioned a portrait of me? She commissioned a portrait of the truth, your truth, the face you make when you forget to perform. That was not her right. She was your mother. She watched you turn yourself into a machine. She wanted you to see what it was costing you. Gabriel pressed his hands to his face. When he spoke, his voice was muffled. I do not want to see it. I know, but you need to. Why? Iris crossed the library and stood before him, close enough that he had to look up to meet her eyes. Because you are performing your entire life the way I have been performing mine. Because your mother understood that the performance was killing you the same way it killed her. Because I have spent 6 weeks sitting in a chair letting a painter strip away every defense I have. And if I can bear to be seen, so can you. Gabriel looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "I am afraid." "Of what?" "Of what I will see. Of who I am when I am not performing. You are the man who instructed Voss to paint me exactly as I am. You are the man who watches me in that studio as though I am the most important thing in the room. You are the man your mother believed could survive being honest." "My mother died." "Yes. And you have spent 18 months trying to die the same way. Slowly, invisibly, by refusing to feel anything that might crack your composure." The accusation struck like a physical blow. Gabriel stood abruptly, turning away from her. "You do not know what you are asking. I am asking you to look at a painting. If you can break a betrothal contract, you can look at your own face." He turned back to her, his expression raw. "I haven't broken the contract. Not yet, but you will. Because you cannot marry me while pretending you feel nothing. And I cannot marry you while knowing you are too frightened to admit you feel something. I am not frightened. You are terrified. I recognize it because I have been terrified for 3 years. I agreed to this betrothal because I had decided that wanting things was too dangerous. You agreed because you had decided that feeling things was unnecessary. We are both wrong, Gabriel, and I will not marry a man who needs a dead woman and a painter to teach him that." She used his name. "Not your Grace, not Lord Cavendish. Gabriel. The man underneath the title." He looked at her with an expression she could not read. Something between devastation and relief. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to see the portrait. I want you to decide whether you can bear to let it exist. And then I want you to tell me the truth about why you have been sitting in that studio for 8 weeks. I have been supervising the commission." "That is a lie." "I have been." He stopped, breathed, started again. "I have been watching you become the most honest thing in my life." The admission hung in the air between them. Iris felt something in her chest open. Not breaking, but expanding, the way a door swings wide after years locked shut. "Then come to the studio in 3 days. See what your mother wanted you to see, and then decide whether you can live with the truth or whether you would rather destroy it." She left before he could answer, walking out of the library with her pulse hammering and her hands unsteady, and the terrible, exhilarating knowledge that she had just done the bravest and most foolish thing of her life. 3 days later, Gabriel stood in Voss's studio staring at 2 portraits. The first was Iris. Voss had painted her exactly as she was. Watchful, intelligent, guarded, furious. The face of a woman who had spent years hiding her mind and had finally been given permission to stop. It was not a flattering portrait in the conventional sense. It was not soft or decorative or designed to make her marriageable. It was true. The second portrait was Gabriel. He stood before it for a long time, unable to look away. Voss had captured every unguarded moment. The expression on Gabriel's face when he entered the studio and forgot to compose himself. The way his hands clenched when Iris spoke about writing. The hunger in his eyes when he watched her. The visible fracture lines in his composure, the cracks that showed a man trying desperately to feel nothing and failing with every breath. It was unbearable. It was also undeniable. "When did you paint this?" Gabriel's voice sounded hollow in the quiet studio. "During every sitting. You thought I was painting only Lady Iris. I was painting both of you. My mother commissioned this." "Yes. She understood something you do not. That you are performing your life the way she performed hers, and that the performance will kill you if you do not stop." Gabriel looked at Voss. "She died performing. She died because she did not stop soon enough. She wanted you to stop before it was too late. It is already too late. I do not know how to be anything else. Then learn. How? Voss gestured toward Iris's portrait. Start by being honest with the woman you love. I do not. Yes, you do. It is written all over that canvas. It is written all over your face right now. The only person in London who does not know you are in love with her is you. And that is because you have spent 18 months refusing to notice what you feel. Gabriel turned back to his portrait. The clenched hands, the desperate attention, the man his mother had seen and tried to save. I cannot hang this in the gallery. Why not? Because it will tell everyone who sees it that I am not the man they think I am. Good. You are not the man they think you are. You are a man who feels things and tries to hide it. You are a man who fell in love during a portrait sitting and did not know how to say it. You are your mother's son, and she wanted the world to see that. The world does not need to see this. No, but you do, and so does Lady Iris. As if summoned, the studio door opened. Iris entered, wearing a simple morning dress, her hair pulled back, her face carrying none of the performance she had worn to their first sitting. She looked at Gabriel, then at the portraits. You came. You asked me to. I did not think you would. Neither did I. They stood in silence, the two portraits between them. Iris walked slowly to Gabriel's canvas and studied it. The unguarded expression, the clenched hands, the visible evidence of feeling. This is what I see when I look at you, she said quietly. I did not know. You do now. Gabriel turned to face her. Your father wants me to destroy both portraits and commission something more suitable. My father wants many things that are not his to have. The betrothal is a contract. It is not a marriage. It is not a life. It is an arrangement built on the assumption that neither of us would ever feel anything real. And now I have seen your face when you think no one is watching. Now I know you instructed Voss to paint me honestly when you could have demanded I be painted conveniently. Now I know your mother believed you were capable of being more than a beautiful machine. Gabriel's hands were shaking. I do not know how to be more than that. Then learn, or do not. But decide, Gabriel. Decide whether you want to hang these portraits in your gallery and let the world see two people who are trying to be honest. Or decide to destroy them and go back to performing until it kills you. What about you? What do you want? I want to marry a man who can look at his own face and not be ashamed of what he sees. I want to marry a man who knows I write political essays and thinks that makes me more interesting, not less marriageable. I want to marry a man who is willing to feel something, even when feeling is terrifying. And if I cannot be that man, then I will walk away. Not because you failed me, because I refuse to watch you destroy yourself the way your mother destroyed herself. The void that opened felt enormous. Gabriel looked at the portraits, both of them, side by side. Two people caught being honest. Two people who had spent years performing and had finally been seen. He looked at Iris. I have been in love with you since the third sitting. She drew in a sharp breath. Why did you not say anything? Because I did not know how. Because my mother spent 30 years loving my father, and it killed her slowly. Because I watched her perform happiness until there was nothing left underneath. And I decided that not feeling was safer than feeling and losing. Your mother did not die because she felt too much. She died because she was never allowed to feel honestly. There is a difference. Gabriel closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were bright with something he had not allowed himself in 18 months. I do not want to marry you because of a political alliance. Good. Because I do not want to marry you because my father needs your voting bloc. I want to marry you because you are the only person who has ever made me want to stop performing. That is better, but not enough. What else do you need? I need you to hang both portraits in the gallery. I need you to let the world see what your mother saw. I need you to prove that you can bear being known. Gabriel looked at the canvases, then at Voss. Can they be hung together? Yes, side by side. Your mother requested it specifically. Then hang them. Voss raised an eyebrow. You are certain? No, but I am doing it anyway. He turned to Iris. I am going to break the betrothal contract. Why? Because it was built on a lie. Because I do not want to marry you as a political instrument. Because if we are going to do this, I want to do it honestly. Your reform bill can wait. My mother spent 30 years building a political career on strategic marriages and perfect appearances. I will not make the same mistake. Iris stepped closer. If you break the contract, I lose the protection of the arrangement. If the portraits hang, I lose my reputation for compliance. If my father discovers I am Veritas, I lose everything. I know. And you are willing to risk that? I am willing to risk everything, if it means you can be honest. If it means I can be honest. If it means we can build something that is not a performance. Iris looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand, the first time she had touched him deliberately, without accident or necessity. Then break the contract. Hang the portraits. And when the scandal breaks, we will face it together. Gabriel's fingers closed around hers. You are braver than I am. No, I am just tired of being afraid. The portraits hung in the Cavendish Gallery 3 weeks later. By then, Gabriel had formally dissolved the betrothal contract. His solicitor had argued against it. 2 years of political work destroyed, the Ashworth voting bloc lost, the Canal Reform Bill dead in committee. Gabriel had signed the papers anyway. By then, Iris's father had discovered she was Veritas. He had confronted her in his study, furious that his daughter had been publishing political commentary under a male pseudonym. Iris had told him she would continue writing under her own name if he preferred. He had not preferred. She had written the essay anyway. By then, London society had begun whispering about the Duke who had broken a betrothal and hung 2 scandalous portraits in his gallery. One of a woman who looked furious instead of compliant. One of himself looking devastated instead of composed. The portraits hung side by side in the Cavendish Gallery, replacing 2 of the 8 soft-painted brides. Visitors came to see them. Some were horrified. Some were fascinated. All of them understood that something had changed in the House of Cavendish. That a man who had spent his entire life performing control had chosen to let the world see him crack. Iris visited the gallery on a Tuesday morning. She stood before the portraits for a long time, studying them the way she had studied Gabriel during the sittings, looking for the truth beneath the surface. A young woman stood beside her, a stranger, perhaps 20, dressed in the careful respectability of minor gentry. "They match," the woman said. Iris turned. "I beg your pardon?" "The expressions. They are both trying not to feel something, but the painter caught it anyway." Iris looked at the portraits again. The woman was right. Both faces carried the same tension, the visible effort of trying to hide what could not be hidden. "Do you know the subjects?" the young woman asked. "I am one of them." The woman's eyes widened. "You are Lady Iris?" "I am." "Then you are also Veritas. I read your essays. They are the only political commentary worth reading." Iris felt something warm and strange bloom in her chest. "Thank you. Will you continue writing now that everyone knows?" "Yes. Good. The world needs more women who are willing to be inconvenient. The young woman left, and Iris stood alone before the portraits. Two people caught being honest. Two people who had decided that performance was more dangerous than truth. She left the gallery and walked to Voss's studio. He was working on a new commission, a landscape, soft and undemanding after the intensity of the double portrait. He looked up when she entered. "Lady Iris, I did not expect you." "I saw the portraits. They are hanging together." "Yes," His Grace insisted. "I would like to sit again." Voss set down his brush. "For a new portrait?" "No, for a conversation, in the only room where we have both been honest." "I see. And should I expect His Grace?" "I have already sent word. He will be here." Voss smiled, a small, knowing expression. "Then I will leave the studio to you. Do not touch the wet canvas by the east wall." He left, and Iris sat in the portrait chair. Not posing, just sitting, the way she had learned to sit during the weeks of sessions, without performance, without the careful arrangement of her face into something acceptable. The door opened. Gabriel entered. He looked different than he had during the sittings. Tired, perhaps, or simply more honest. The careful composure he had worn like armor had softened into something more human. He sat in his corner, the same corner where he had watched her for 8 weeks. They looked at each other across the studio. "You hung the portraits," Iris said. "I did." "Your mother would be proud." "My mother would say it took me too long." "She would be right." Gabriel smiled. A real smile, not the careful diplomatic expression he gave to committees and formal dinners. "I broke the betrothal contract. I know. My father is furious. I am sorry. I am not. The contract was built on a lie. I would rather have honesty and scandal than compliance and safety." "What happens now?" "That depends. Are you proposing?" "Not yet. I am asking whether you would be willing to begin without an arrangement, without a contract, without a frame to tell us what we are supposed to be." "That is terrifying." "More terrifying than a betrothal built on political strategy?" "Considerably. A betrothal has terms. This has none." "Is that a no?" Iris looked at the empty easel, at the north-facing window, at the space where Voss had spent 8 weeks painting the truth. "It is a yes spoken by a woman who is out of practice at wanting things. Give me time to remember how." Gabriel did not cross the studio. He did not take her hand. He simply sat in his corner, looking at her the way he had looked at her during the sittings, with attention, with hunger, with the particular intensity of a man who had finally stopped pretending he felt nothing. "We have time," he said. "Do we? The scandal will pass, or it will not. Either way, I would rather face it with you than hide from it alone." Iris felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "Your mother commissioned those portraits because she wanted you to see yourself. Do you? Do you see what she saw?" "I see a man who spent 18 months trying to turn himself into a machine. I see a man who fell in love during a portrait sitting and did not know how to admit it. I see my mother's son, and I understand now why she was so frightened for me. And what do you see when you look at my portrait? I see a woman who agreed to be sold because she thought wanting things was too dangerous. I see a woman who writes essays that are quoted in Parliament. I see someone who is braver than she knows. I am not brave. I am terrified. Then we are well matched." They sat in silence, the studio light shifting as the morning aged. Outside, the gallery held their portraits. 2 faces caught feeling for the first time in 8 generations of performed composure. Inside, the originals sat in the same room where they had learned to be honest, beginning the slower, harder work of learning to feel without a frame. Gabriel stood, crossed the studio, stopped before Iris's chair. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the space beside her. She nodded. He sat on the arm of the chair, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, close enough that the careful distance they had maintained for 8 weeks had finally, deliberately closed. "I am going to kiss you," he said quietly. "If you do not want that, tell me now." "I want that." "You are certain?" "I have never been more certain of anything." He leaned down. She reached up, placing one hand against his jaw the way she might adjust the angle of a canvas. The kiss was slow, deliberate, and initiated by both of them equally. Two people who had spent weeks watching each other across a studio, finally permitting themselves to close the distance. When they pulled apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it weeks ago. You said it when you told Voss to paint me honestly. You said it when you hung the portrait your mother commissioned. You said it every time you sat in that corner and forgot to compose your face. I am not good at this. Neither am I. We will learn together." They sat in the studio as the light turned gold. Two people learning to be honest, without a painter watching, without a canvas between them. Outside, the world continued. Scandal and gossip and political consequence. Inside, in the room where they had first been seen, they began building something that had no frame, no contract, no performance. Just two people who had decided that being known was worth the risk of being seen. 2 months later, Iris published an essay in the Northern Correspondent under her own name on the architecture of honest governance. Why marriages built on truth produce better policy than marriages built on strategy. Gabriel read it over breakfast and smiled. 3 months later, they married in a small ceremony with no political guests and no performance. Voss attended. He gave them a wedding gift, a small sketch of the two of them in the studio, sitting in their respective corners, watching each other across the space where they had learned to be honest. 6 months later, the Canal Reform Bill passed with a different voting coalition, one Gabriel had built through honest argument rather than strategic marriage. And in the Cavendish Gallery, the two portraits hung side by side, a woman who had learned to stop performing and a man who had learned to feel. 8 generations of soft-painted brides watched them from their frames, silent witnesses to the first honest faces the gallery had ever held. Visitors still came to see them. Some were scandalized, some were moved. All of them understood that something true had happened in the House of Cavendish, something rare and dangerous and worth the cost. In the studio, the light still fell through the north-facing window in pale sheets. Voss worked on new commissions, painting other faces, other truths. But sometimes, when the studio was empty, he would look at the corner where Gabriel had sat, and the chair where Iris had learned to drop her mask. And he would remember the two people who had taught him that the best portraits are the ones where the subject forgets and they are being painted. Truth, he had learned, was not something you could commission. It was something you had to earn, slowly, painfully, in a room with good light and someone brave enough to look.